She walked into that glass-walled bank holding a 9-year-old's hand and a notebook full of evidence they never saw coming. The billionaire smiled for the cameras, cracked jokes about pennies teaching humility, and had no idea the quiet black woman in sensible shoes had already set the trap. Zuri just wanted to see her balance. $12 she'd saved from birthday cards and allowance, now drained to 8 by fees designed to punish poverty. The crowd laughed when the microphone squealed. The branch manager's hand trembled over the keyboard. And when the clock struck noon, that screen lit up green with entries the billionaire couldn't erase, couldn't spin, couldn't buy his way out of. What happened next didn't just restore one child's savings. It exposed an algorithm bleeding thousands of kids dry and forced every dollar back in real time. Subscribe right now, tell me where you're watching from, and stay till the end, because patience and a paper trail just took down a predatory empire in broad daylight. Ruth Ellison sat at the far table in the community library. Her notebook lay open beside a stack of passbooks. The afternoon light stretched across the worn pages. She had taught basic budgeting here for 11 years. The children filed out in clusters. Their voices bounced off the tile floors. Zuri Mayfield remained at her seat. She clutched a small coin pouch against her chest. "Can I ask you something?" Zuri said. Ruth looked up. Her eyes found the girl's face. "Of course," Ruth said. Zuri opened her passbook. The entries marched down the page in neat rows. Her finger traced the numbers. "My balance keeps going down," Zuri said, "but I didn't take anything out." Ruth leaned closer. She read the line items. Nuisance fees appeared every month. Each one siphoned pennies or dimes. Her chest tightened. "How much do you have saved?" Ruth asked. "I had $12, Zuri said. "Now it says $8.47. Ruth felt anger rise in her throat. She had seen this pattern before. Small accounts drained by fees designed to punish poverty. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "May I make a copy of this page?" Ruth asked. Zuri nodded. She handed over the passbook. Ruth walked to the library desk and used the public scanner. The machine hummed. The image appeared on the screen. When she returned, Zuri's eyes were wet. "Did I do something wrong?" Zuri asked. "No," Ruth said. "You did everything right. Someone else made this system. I'm going to look into it." Ruth opened her own notebook. She added Zuri's data to a column of similar stories. 14 accounts now. All children under 12. All bleeding money through coded fees. "What if they don't listen?" Zuri asked. Ruth's breath caught. She had spent 40 years auditing banks. She had filed reports that disappeared into filing cabinets. But this time felt different. The girl's trust demanded something more. "Then we make them listen," Ruth said. "Can you meet me?" "Tomorrow afternoon. We'll go to the bank together." Zuri wiped her eyes. Her voice was small but determined. "Okay," Zuri said. Ruth closed her notebook. She locked it with a tiny brass clasp. The weight of the evidence pressed against her palm. Tomorrow she would walk Zuri into that glass-walled branch. Tomorrow she would ask questions where others could hear. Something shifted in her expression. She had been quiet too long. The bank stood on Main Street. Glass walls reflected the morning sky. Posters covered the entrance doors. Bright letters announced, "Kids Prosperity Day, tomorrow at noon." Ruth held Zuri's hand. They approached the building slowly. The child's palm was damp with nervous sweat. "Will they be nice?" Zuri asked. "They'll be professional," Ruth said. "That's different." The doors slid open. Cool air washed over them. The lobby gleamed with marble and chrome. A woman behind the welcome desk smiled without warmth. Daniel Park emerged from an office. He wore a pressed suit and polished shoes. His nameplate read, Branch manager. "Mrs. Ellison," Daniel said. "How can I help you today?" Ruth recognized his tone. Polite but distant. She had heard it 1,000 times. Her voice was calm. "I have questions about youth account fees," Ruth said. Daniel's jaw tightened. He gestured toward his desk. They followed him across the lobby. Zuri stayed close to Ruth's side. An assistant appeared with a tray of brochures. She chirped about balloons and photo opportunities. Her enthusiasm felt rehearsed. "Tomorrow will be wonderful," the assistant said. "Mr. Lang himself will be here." Ruth knew that name. Victor Lang, fintech billionaire, bank owner. His face appeared on news screens weekly. Daniel sat behind his desk. He pulled up account policy on his computer screen. "Youth fees are standard across the industry," Daniel said. "They encourage financial responsibility." Ruth leaned forward. Her eyes met his. "They encourage children to stop saving," Ruth said. "That's not the same thing." Daniel looked away. He clicked through screens too quickly. Ruth noticed his hands trembled slightly. "Is there a fee schedule I can review?" Ruth asked. He printed a single sheet. The text was dense and technical. Ruth scanned the categories: zip code modifiers, age-based penalty tiers, minimum balance triggers. "This algorithm targets neighborhoods," Ruth said. "That's not what it's called," Daniel said. "But that's what it does," Ruth said. The silence stretched between them. The assistant hovered near the door. Her smile had faded into confusion. Ruth stood. She folded the brochure and tucked it into her purse. Zuri followed her lead. "We'll come back tomorrow," Ruth said, "when the public can watch." Daniel's eyes found hers. Something passed between them. Fear or recognition. She couldn't tell which. They walked back into the sunlight. Zuri's breath caught. "He didn't believe you," Zuri said. "He believed me," Ruth said. "That's why he's afraid." The library's main floor buzzed with afternoon activity. Seniors clustered around computer stations. Teenagers sprawled near the magazine racks. Ruth and Zuri sat at their usual table. The news screen above the circulation desk flickered to life. Victor Lang's face filled the frame. He stood on a stage surrounded by children in matching t-shirts. His laugh was smooth and practiced. "Education is investment," Victor said. "Tomorrow we announce scholarships for 100 local families." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Victor's smile never wavered. Evelyn Duarte approached their table. She was the head librarian. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She glanced at Ruth's open notebook. "You watching this?" Evelyn asked. "I am," Ruth said. "Generous man," Evelyn said. Ruth's voice was quiet but firm. "Generosity without fairness is just branding," Ruth said. Evelyn sat down. She studied Ruth's face. Years of friendship had taught her when to push and when to wait. "You found something?" Evelyn said. Ruth nodded. She turned her notebook so Evelyn could see. The columns of fees and account numbers filled 3 pages. Each entry represented a child. Each number told a story of extracted wealth. "He gives scholarships while his bank drains kids' accounts?" Evelyn asked. "Exactly," Ruth said. Zuri watched the screen. Victor was handing a giant check to a smiling family. The mother wiped away tears. The children bounced with excitement. "Will he be there tomorrow?" Zuri asked. "Yes," Ruth said. "That's why we're going." Evelyn's breath caught. She understood what Ruth was planning. Public confrontation. Visible witness. The kind of moment that couldn't be buried. "You need someone to film it," Evelyn said. Ruth felt something shift in her chest. She had expected to stand alone. The offer of solidarity steadied her resolve. "On your lunch break?" Ruth asked. "I'll make time," Evelyn said. The news segment ended. The screen returned to silent community announcements. Ruth closed her notebook. Tomorrow the stage would be set. Tomorrow she would step into the light. Ruth sat in the library's back stairwell. Her phone pressed against her ear. The signal was weak but stable. She dialed Maya Ortiz's direct line. Maya answered on the third ring. Her voice was professional and guarded. "This is Ortiz," Maya said. "Maya, it's Ruth Ellison," Ruth said. "From the church finance class you visited last year." A pause, then recognition. "Mrs. Ellison," Maya said. "How can I help you?" Ruth took a breath. She chose her words carefully. Maya worked for the State Financial Examination Office. Her power was real but constrained by procedure. "I've mapped what I believe is a youth penalty algorithm," Ruth said. 14 accounts, all under 12, all targeted by coded fees. The line went quiet. Ruth heard papers rustling. "That's a serious allegation," Maya said. "I have documentation," Ruth said. Maya's voice dropped lower. Ruth sensed she was alone now. "I'm listening," Maya said. Ruth described the pattern. Zip codes that triggered higher fees, age brackets that compounded charges, accounts that hemorrhaged cents and dimes while parents worked too many hours to notice. "If I had clean evidence," Maya said, "and if timing aligned with our quarterly review cycle, there might be grounds for enforcement action." Ruth's chest tightened. She heard the careful phrasing. Maya couldn't promise anything, but she was offering a path. "I can have a packet to you tonight," Ruth said. "Make it thorough," Maya said. "And Mrs. Ellison, if this holds up, reversals could post automatically under our consent mechanism, but only if the bank confirms the pattern." Ruth felt her pulse quicken. Public confrontation with regulatory teeth. The combination could force change. "When would reversals post?" Ruth asked. "Same day as confirmation," Maya said. "Usually at noon when systems refresh." Ruth thanked her. She ended the call. The stairwell was dim and cool. She climbed back to the main floor. Tonight she would build that packet. Tomorrow she would force that confirmation. Ruth's kitchen table became a war room. Papers spread in careful stacks. Her laptop glowed in the evening dimness. She had printed fee schedules from the bank's website. She had copied entries from 14 passbooks. She had cross-referenced zip codes with census data. The algorithm revealed itself in the numbers. Poorer neighborhoods paid more. Younger children paid most. The extraction was surgical and persistent. She wrote a cover memo. Her training as an auditor shaped every sentence. Clear findings, cited evidence, calculated harm. "Dignity is interest that grows only when left untouched," she typed. "These fees rob children of both." Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. She thought about the families she'd counseled. Single mothers working double shifts. Grandparents raising grandchildren on fixed incomes. All of them trying to teach thrift in a system designed to punish it. Ruth attached the documents to an email. Maya's address filled the "to" field. The subject line read, "Youth Fee Pattern Documentation, Urgent Review." Her mouse hovered over send. This was the moment of commitment. Once Maya had the files, the machinery of enforcement would begin. There would be no calling it back. She clicked. The transmission bar crept across the screen. Each percentage felt heavier than the last. At 80%, her internet connection wavered. She held her breath. The bar completed. The confirmation chime sounded. "Message sent" appeared in green letters. Ruth leaned back in her chair. The kitchen clock showed 11:47. She set her alarm for 6. Tomorrow she would wake early. Tomorrow she would walk Zuri through the plan one final time. The house settled into nighttime quiet. Ruth's eyes found the ceiling. She felt tired but certain. Sleep would come eventually. Morning light filtered through the library's tall windows. Ruth sat with Zuri at their usual table. The building was nearly empty. Only a few early patrons browsed the stacks. Ruth spread her notes between them. She spoke slowly and clearly. "We're going to ask to see your balance," Ruth said, "when everyone else can see it too." Zuri's hands twisted in her lap. Her voice was barely audible. "What if people laugh?" Zuri asked. Ruth's chest tightened. She wouldn't lie to the child. Mockery was possible. Humiliation was a tool the powerful used reflexively. "Some might laugh," Ruth said, "but the truth will stand taller than their laughter." Zuri looked down at her passbook. The worn cover showed years of careful saving. Coins deposited after allowance, dollars added from birthday cards. All of it slowly drained by fees she didn't understand. "Will Mr. Park help us?" Zuri asked. "I don't know," Ruth said, "but we don't need his permission to ask questions." Evelyn approached from the circulation desk. She carried her phone and a small notebook. Her expression was determined. "I'm coming on my lunch break," Evelyn said. "I'll film everything, just in case we need to remember exactly what was said." Ruth felt something shift in her expression. She had expected judgment or caution. Instead, Evelyn offered solidarity. The librarian pulled out a chair and sat down. "You're sure about this?" Evelyn asked Ruth. "I sent the documentation last night," Ruth said. "The state examiner has it. If we can force the bank to confirm the pattern, enforcement can trigger automatically." Evelyn's breath caught. She looked at Zuri. "You're very brave," Evelyn said to the child. Zuri didn't feel brave. Her stomach hurt. Her hands were cold. But Ruth had promised the truth would matter. She chose to believe that. "I just want to see my balance," Zuri said. Ruth handed her the passbook. Zuri tucked it carefully into her backpack. They would go together at 11:30. They would walk into that glass building. They would ask their simple question while cameras flashed and balloons bobbed. The silence hung between them. Then Ruth smiled. It was small, but genuine. "Whatever happens," Ruth said, "you did nothing wrong. Remember that." Ruth returned to the bank alone. Mid-morning traffic hummed outside the glass walls. Daniel Park stood behind the main counter. He reviewed paperwork with a teller. Ruth approached slowly. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Daniel glanced up. His jaw tightened. "Mrs. Ellison?" Daniel said. "What can I do for you?" "I'd like to review Zuri Mayfield's account," Ruth said. "With you, before tomorrow." Daniel's eyes found hers. He looked tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing and doing nothing. He pulled up Zuri's account on his terminal. The fees lined up in ruthless columns: service charge, minimum balance fee, activity penalty, statement fee. Each one extracted cents that added to dollars over months. "These are standard," Daniel said. "Standard for which zip codes?" Ruth asked. Daniel didn't answer. His hand moved toward the mouse, then stopped. Ruth had been an auditor long enough to recognize moral paralysis when she saw it. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a single folded sheet. It was a summary of her findings. Clean numbers. Clear patterns. She placed it on the counter where he could see but didn't have to acknowledge. "You could make this right," Ruth said. "You have the authority." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "I have a mortgage," Daniel said. "I have 2 kids in college." "So do the families you're charging," Ruth said. The silence stretched. A customer approached another window. Business continued around them. The world didn't stop for conscience. Ruth stepped back. She wouldn't force him, but she wouldn't protect him either. "Tomorrow at noon," Ruth said. We'll ask to see her balance. You can read it however you choose. She walked out before he could respond. The door whispered shut behind her. Sunlight hit her face. She checked her watch. 26 hours until confrontation. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. One word. Received. Ruth's breath caught. The machinery had begun. Ruth's phone lit up with an email notification. She sat in her parked car outside the library. The sender was Maya Ortiz. The subject line read, Possible Action Timeline. She opened the message. The text was brief and carefully worded. If findings substantiate predatory pattern and bank confirms algorithmic fee structure during public event, consent decree reversals could auto-post at 12:00 p.m. tomorrow via enforcement deposit protocol. No advance notice to institution. Will monitor real-time. Stay accessible. Ruth read it 3 times. The implications settled over her. If Daniel confirmed the pattern publicly, if Maya's office had found corroboration in their own systems, then accounts across the city could see restitution posts simultaneously. Live. Witnessed. Undeniable. She texted Daniel's number. She had found it in the church directory months ago. The message was simple. Please. Then she added, Noon tomorrow. Refresh the ledger. Let us see what's real. The message showed as delivered. No response came. Ruth didn't expect one. Men caught between conscience and career rarely spoke clearly. She set her phone face down on the passenger seat. Her watch read 5 minutes fast. She had always kept it that way. A small hedge against being late. Zuri emerged from the library. Her backpack bounced against her shoulders. Ruth rolled down the window. Ready for tomorrow? Ruth called. Zuri walked to the car. Her eyes were serious. Are you scared? Zuri asked. Ruth felt the weight of the question. She could lie. She could offer false confidence. But the child deserved truth. Yes, Ruth said, but we're going together. That makes it different. Zuri nodded. She adjusted her backpack straps. Her voice was steadier than her hands. I trust you, Zuri said. Ruth's chest tightened. That trust was a responsibility heavier than any audit she'd ever conducted. She wouldn't waste it. She wouldn't break it. Tomorrow we just ask to see your balance, Ruth said. That's all. The rest will follow. Zuri walked toward her grandmother's car. Ruth watched her go. Then she started her engine. The sun was setting over Main Street. The bank's glass walls caught the light and threw it back. Tomorrow those walls would reveal more than reflection. She drove home slowly. Her commitment was complete. The bank lobby had transformed overnight. Balloons in primary colors clustered near the entrance. A banner stretched above the teller windows. Kids' Prosperity Day. Cameras mounted on tripods captured every angle. Staff wore matching bright shirts over their business clothes. Ruth and Zuri entered at 11:45. The noise hit them first. Children laughing, parents chatting, music playing through hidden speakers. The spectacle was overwhelming. A handler with a clipboard intercepted them. Her smile was wide and rehearsed. Welcome, the handler said. Are you here for photos? The scholarship line forms at 12:30. Ruth's voice was calm. We're here to check a balance, Ruth said. The handler's smile faltered. She glanced at Zuri. The child's worn sneakers and plain jacket didn't match the atmosphere of celebration. The teller windows are available, the handler said, but the main event starts at noon. Ruth took Zuri's hand. They walked past the photo booth, past the goodie bag table, past the clusters of families in their Sunday best. They moved toward Daniel Park's station. Daniel stood rigid behind his terminal. His tie was perfectly knotted. Sweat darkened his collar. He saw them coming. His eyes found Ruth's. Victor Lang held court near the scholarship display. His voice carried across the lobby. He shook hands and posed for pictures. His laughter punctuated every exchange. "Pennies teach humility," Victor said to a journalist. "Every child should learn the value of $1 before they dream of earning millions." A few parents chuckled. Zuri's steps slowed. Ruth felt the child's hand grip tighter. "Keep walking," Ruth whispered. They reached Daniel's window. He looked at them without speaking. The silence hung between them. Ruth placed Zuri's passbook on the counter. "We'd like to see her current balance," Ruth said. Daniel picked up the passbook. His hands shook slightly. Around them the celebration continued. But here at this window, time seemed to slow. Daniel typed Zuri's account number into his terminal. The screen loaded slowly. Rows of transactions appeared. The fees marched down the page relentlessly. A handler drifted closer. She had noticed the tension at Daniel's window. Her walkie-talkie crackled with instructions about photo timing. "Is everything okay here?" the handler asked. Ruth's voice was steady. "We're reviewing an account," Ruth said. Victor's voice boomed from across the lobby. He was telling a story about his first piggy bank, how breaking it taught him about commitment. The crowd laughed on cue. "Pennies teach humility," Victor said again. "That's why small savings matter. They build character." More laughter rippled through the space. Zuri's face flushed. She had brought her pennies here. She had believed they mattered. Now the richest man in the room was making jokes about them. Ruth placed her hand on Zuri's shoulder. She leaned close and whispered. "He doesn't understand what you've built," Ruth said. "That's his failure, not yours." Daniel scrolled through the account history. Each fee appeared with a code: service charge, low balance penalty, statement fee, account maintenance. They accumulated silently, month after month. "There are a lot of fees," Daniel said quietly. The handler's walkie-talkie crackled again. She spoke into it quickly. "We might have a situation at Station 3, the handler said. Victor's assistant approached. She wore a headset and carried a tablet. Her smile was professional, but her eyes were calculating. "Is there a problem?" the assistant asked. Ruth met her gaze calmly. "We're asking about fees on a youth account," Ruth said. The assistant glanced at the screen. She saw Zuri's balance, $8.47. Her expression shifted. Amusement flickered across her features. "Mr. Lang loves talking about teaching kids to save," the assistant said. "Maybe we could feature this young lady in the event?" Zuri shrank against Ruth. Her breath caught. Being featured meant being displayed. Being displayed meant being exposed. "No, thank you," Ruth said. "We just want to understand these fees." Victor's attention turned toward them. He was drawn by the cluster forming near Daniel's station. His instinct for spectacle pulled him closer. The crowd parted for him. Victor approached with the confidence of ownership. His smile was camera-ready. He smelled of expensive cologne. His shoes were hand-stitched leather. "What balance are we celebrating today?" Victor asked. His voice carried. Nearby conversations stopped. Parents turned to watch. Children clustered closer. The moment was becoming public, whether Ruth wanted it or not. Daniel's hand froze on the mouse. He looked from the screen to Victor to Ruth. His voice was tight when he spoke. "This is Zuri Mayfield's account," Daniel said. Victor leaned toward the screen. He read the balance. $8.47. His eyebrows raised. He straightened and addressed the gathering crowd. $8, Victor said. "That's wonderful. Some of my best lessons came from amounts exactly this size. Breaking $1 teaches you to really think about value." A few people chuckled uncertainly. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. Ruth's hand tightened on the child's shoulder. Actually, Ruth said, her balance was $12. These fees reduced it. Victor's smile didn't waver. He thrived in moments of public attention. This was just another stage. Fees teach accountability, Victor said. Banks aren't free to operate. Someone has to cover the costs. Ruth's voice was steady but firm. Someone is covering the costs, Ruth said. Children who can't afford them. The crowd shifted. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed eager for conflict. Cameras began turning towards the confrontation. Daniel stared at his screen. Ruth noticed his jaw working. He was reading the fee codes. Really reading them. His voice was barely audible. There are patterns here, Daniel said. Victor's handler moved closer. She spoke into her headset quickly. Instructions flowed back. Damage control protocols engaged. Why don't we discuss this in my office? Victor said to Ruth. His smile was still in place, but his eyes had sharpened. Why don't we discuss it here? Ruth said, where everyone can learn about accountability. The silence stretched. Zuri's breath caught. She could feel the tension building. Ruth had promised the truth would matter. That promise was being tested now. Victor's smile finally dimmed. Just slightly. Just enough to show teeth. Evelyn pushed through the crowd. Her phone was already recording. She held it high enough to capture faces and reactions. Her arrival shifted the energy. I'm documenting this for community records, Evelyn announced. Public event means public record. More phones appeared. Parents who had been passive observers became active witnesses. The handler's walkie-talkie exploded with frantic chatter. Mr. Lang needs to proceed to the stage for the scholarship announcement, the handler said loudly. Victor ignored her. He had spent decades reading rooms. This moment was slipping from his control. But walking away would look worse than staying. Let's make sure we understand the situation, Victor said. This young lady saved $12. Current balance is $8.47. What fees reduced it? Daniel scrolled back through the account history. His voice was getting steadier. Ruth sensed something changing in him. Monthly service charge, Daniel said. Low balance penalty, statement fee, activity monitoring fee, account maintenance charge. How much total? Victor asked. Daniel calculated quickly. His eyes widened slightly. $3.53 over 6 months, Daniel said. Victor spread his hands to the crowd. His smile returned. That's 59 cents per month, Victor said. Less than a candy bar. Surely that's reasonable for professional banking services. Ruth's voice cut through his performance. It's 29% of her savings, Ruth said. How much of your wealth do you pay in fees, Mr. Lang? The question landed hard. A few people in the crowd murmured. Victor's smile tightened at the edges. I pay substantial fees, Victor said. That's how sophisticated wealth management works. But not 29%, Ruth said. No, Victor admitted. Not that high. Evelyn moved closer. Her phone captured the exchange. Other cameras joined hers. What had been a publicity event was becoming something else. Something unscripted. A parent near the back spoke up. Her voice was uncertain but growing stronger. My kid's account has fees too, the parent said. I thought that was just normal. Another voice joined. Then another. The crowd was awakening to shared experience. Ruth felt momentum building. Daniel, Ruth said, is there a way to show how these fees vary by zip code? Daniel's hand hovered over the keyboard. Victor's eyes snapped to him. That look contained warning and promise, career and consequences. The silence hung over them all. Victor's voice shifted to something more controlled. He was a man accustomed to narrative management. He turned fully toward the cameras. "I think we're having an important conversation here," Victor said, "about financial literacy and responsibility. Let's bring everyone into the dialogue." He gestured to his assistant. She rushed forward with a wireless microphone. Victor clipped it to his collar. Suddenly his voice filled the lobby through the sound system. "How many of you teach your children to save?" Victor asked the crowd. Hands rose uncertainly. Parents nodded. Victor's smile broadened. "Exactly," Victor said. "Because savings matter, and fees ensure banks can provide secure services. It's a partnership." Ruth stepped forward, her voice carried without amplification. "What if the fees cost more than the partnership is worth?" Ruth asked. Victor's microphone transmitted his laugh. It sounded warm and reasonable, but his eyes had gone cold. "Then customers can bank elsewhere," Victor said. "That's the beauty of free markets." "Not if all the banks use the same algorithm," Ruth said. The word hung in the air. Algorithm. It suggested intention, design, targeting. Victor's handler moved closer to whisper in his ear. He waved her away. "Who are you exactly?" Victor asked Ruth. His tone had shifted from jovial to something sharper. "I'm a retired bank auditor," Ruth said. "I spent 40 years reading fee structures. I know what predatory patterns look like." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Victor's smile was wearing thin. He needed to regain control. He turned toward Zuri. "Sweetheart," Victor said to the child, "are you happy you saved $8? Zuri looked at Ruth, then at her own hands. Her voice came out small but clear. "I saved $12, Zuri said. "You took the rest." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the watching parents. Victor's smile collapsed for just a moment. His handler's whisper became urgent. "Let's acknowledge this young saver properly," Victor said into his microphone. "Sometimes the best lessons come from misunderstandings." Ruth's phone buzzed once in her pocket. She didn't check it. But she knew. The message would be from Maya. One word. The word that meant everything was ready. "What time is it?" Ruth asked Daniel quietly. He glanced at his terminal clock. 11:57, Daniel said. 3 minutes. Ruth's chest tightened. She needed to hold this moment. Keep everyone present. Let noon arrive with witnesses watching. "Mr. Park," Ruth said loudly enough for phones to record. "At noon, will you please refresh Zuri's account ledger?" Daniel's eyes found hers. He understood. Whatever was coming would arrive in 3 minutes. Victor sensed the shift. Something was happening beyond his control. Victor's assistant pulled him aside. Her whispers were urgent. She gestured toward the exit, toward his prepared remarks, toward the scholarship presentation that was supposed to dominate today's narrative. "We need to move to the stage," the assistant said. "In a moment," Victor said. He couldn't leave. Not with cameras recording. Not with this crowd watching. Walking away would confirm guilt. So he stayed. He smiled. He performed patience. Ruth's phone buzzed again. This time she checked it. Maya's text was simple. "Stand by. Systems primed. Confirmation required." Confirmation. That's what this moment was about. Daniel had to acknowledge the pattern, had to say it where others could hear. Then the machinery of enforcement would engage. "Mr. Park," Ruth said, "these fees you've been describing, do they vary based on account holder zip code?" Daniel's jaw tightened. His mouse hovered over menu options. He could refuse. He could obfuscate. He could save his career by staying silent. Or he could tell the truth. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "Could you speak up?" Ruth asked. Daniel's voice was stronger. "Yes," Daniel said. "Fee structures vary by zip code and by account holder age. Children under 12 in certain areas pay higher rates." The crowd erupted. Questions flew. Cameras swiveled. Victor's composure cracked visibly. "That's not predatory," Victor said into his microphone. "That's risk-based pricing. It's industry standard." "It targets poor children," Ruth said. Someone in the crowd shouted agreement. Others joined. The lobby's energy had turned. Victor's handler was frantically speaking into her headset. Evelyn moved to get a better angle. Her phone captured every face, every reaction. The moment would be documented. It couldn't be erased. Daniel clicked through terminal screens. He was accessing system settings Ruth wasn't supposed to know existed. Fee matrices, demographic triggers, income band modifiers. "The algorithm weighs multiple factors," Daniel said. His voice had steadied. He was reading aloud now, documenting, creating record. Account age, balance history, zip code, median income, dependent status. Victor stepped toward Daniel's station. His face had gone red. "You're in violation of proprietary information policy," Victor said. "I'm in violation of my conscience," Daniel said. "And I'm tired of it." Ruth's breath caught. She hadn't expected Daniel to break this completely, but witnessing does that sometimes. It forces choice. The wall clock's minute hand touched 12. Daniel's cursor moved to the refresh button. The terminal screen flickered. System logs appeared. Normal nightly maintenance entries. Routine processing notes. Then something else began to load. Green text. System administrator access. Authorization codes Ruth recognized from her auditing days. These were enforcement deposits, court-ordered restitution, automatic and immediate. "The ledger is refreshing," Daniel said. His voice carried across the now silent lobby. Zuri's account updated first. The balance jumped. $8.47 became $12.16. New entries appeared with official tags. Restitution, unfair youth fee reversal, consent decree. Zuri's mouth opened. No sound came out. Ruth's hand found the child's shoulder. Around the lobby, phones began buzzing. Parents who had accounts at this branch received simultaneous notifications. Account updates, unexpected deposits, reversed fees. A woman gasped. She held up her phone. Her children's accounts had jumped by $15, $23, $41, years of extraction returning in seconds. Victor grabbed Daniel's screen. He read the entries. His face went pale. "What is this?" Victor demanded. Daniel turned the monitor so cameras could see. The green text glowed against the dark interface. "Enforcement action," Daniel said. "State Financial Examination Office. Consent decree triggered by confirmed predatory pattern." Ruth felt something shift in her expression. The machinery had worked. Patience and documentation had moved the needle. Justice was posting in real time. Evelyn's camera captured everything. The scrolling entries, the shocked faces. Victor's collar loosening as he read notice after notice. Tens of thousands of dollars flowing back to accounts across the city. A parent began to cry. Her son's account had been down to $3. Now it showed 17. She hugged the boy tightly. "How did this happen?" Victor's assistant demanded. Ruth stepped forward. Her voice was calm and clear. "I documented the pattern," Ruth said. "I sent evidence to state regulators. They investigated. When Mr. Park confirmed the algorithm publicly, it triggered automatic restitution under existing enforcement protocols." Victor's eyes found Ruth. Rage and comprehension warred in his expression. "You planned this," Victor said. "I demanded accountability," Ruth said. "This is what it looks like." The lobby filled with voices, questions, gratitude, confusion, relief. Parents checked their phones. Children asked what was happening. Reporters began calling their editors. Daniel printed Zuri's updated statement. The paper unfurled from the machine. He handed it to the girl. Her small hands held it carefully. "I'm sorry," Daniel said to Zuri. "For all of it." Zuri looked at the numbers, at her name at the top, at the balance that finally reflected what she'd actually saved. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you," Zuri said. A junior supervisor rushed from a back office. She wore a lanyard marked Operations. Her eyes were wide with panic. "Mr. Park," the supervisor said, "you need to pause all unplanned transactions immediately." Daniel's hand moved toward the keyboard. Old obedience pulled at him. Then he stopped. He looked at the supervisor, at Victor, at Ruth, at Zuri holding her statement. "No," Daniel said. "This is a direct instruction," the supervisor said, "from corporate operations. Pending investigation, all discretionary account modifications must cease." "These aren't discretionary," Daniel said. "They're enforcement deposits. I don't have authority to block them." The supervisor's voice rose. "You're showing proprietary fee structures on a public terminal," the supervisor said. "That's a termination-level breach." Daniel's hands tightened on the edge of his desk. Ruth watched his face. She saw the calculation. Mortgage, college tuition, healthcare, all the things that kept people compliant. "Then terminate me," Daniel said. His voice was steady now. "But I'm not pausing these reversals. Children's money is being restored. That's not negotiable." The supervisor stepped back. She spoke into her own phone rapidly. Victor's handler joined the conversation. Their voices overlapped. Instructions and panic flowed together. Ruth felt isolation trying to wash through her again. The familiar sensation of being silenced, of watching systems close ranks against truth. Her chest tightened, but Zuri squeezed her fingers. The child was still there, still trusting. The moment hadn't collapsed yet. Evelyn moved closer. Her phone still recorded. Her presence was another kind of witness. Ruth wasn't alone. Not this time. Maya Ortiz appeared at the entrance. She wore her state examiner badge clipped to her blazer. 2 colleagues flanked her. Their arrival shifted the energy completely. "I'm Maya Ortiz," she announced loudly. "State Office of Financial Examination. I need to speak with management immediately regarding confirmed findings of systematic fee discrimination against minor account holders." Victor turned toward her. His charm was gone. Only calculation remained. "This is a private event," Victor said. "This is a public branch of a regulated institution," Maya said, "and this is formal notice of ongoing enforcement action." She held up a tablet. Documents glowed on its screen, official seals, legal terminology, the weight of government authority. The crowd parted. Parents moved closer to hear. Reporters raised phones higher. Victor's handler whispered frantically into her headset. Daniel returned to his terminal. His hand hovered over the refresh button one more time. "Should I continue processing reversals?" Daniel asked Maya. "Absolutely," Maya said. "That's why we're here, to ensure full compliance with the consent mechanism." Daniel clicked refresh. Another wave of entries appeared. More accounts updated. More children saw their savings restored. Ruth's breath caught. The silence hung over them all. Then someone began to clap. The clapping started hesitantly. One parent, then another. It grew slowly. Not everyone joined. Some stood frozen in confusion. Others checked phones to confirm their own accounts had updated. But the applause built. It filled the glass-walled lobby. It competed with the decorative music still playing through speakers. It became its own soundtrack. Victor's face flushed darker. He yanked the microphone from his collar. His voice was tight when he spoke to Maya. "I want to see your authorization," Victor said. Maya handed him the tablet. He scrolled through documents. His assistant read over his shoulder. Their whispered conversation was urgent and sharp. This consent decree was executed without notification, Victor said. You were notified, Maya said, when your branch manager confirmed the discriminatory algorithm 30 seconds ago. That was the trigger moment. Everything since is automatic. Victor's eyes snapped to Daniel. The branch manager stood straighter. He didn't flinch under the billionaire's glare. You knew this was coming? Victor said to Daniel. I suspected something was wrong, Daniel said. Mrs. Ellison proved it. I confirmed it. Now it's being fixed. Ruth felt something shift in her chest. Daniel had chosen. Not perfectly, not early enough. But when it mattered most, he had chosen truth. Victor turned on Ruth. His voice dropped to something colder than his public smile. You ambushed me, Victor said, at a charitable event, in front of children. Ruth's voice was calm. You've been ambushing children for years, Ruth said, taking pennies they couldn't afford to lose. Today they're getting them back. Zuri held her statement against her chest. Evelyn's camera captured her face. The child looked small and overwhelmed, but not ashamed. That had changed. Victor's handler pulled him aside. Their conversation was brief and pointed. He listened. His shoulders tightened. When he turned back, his expression had shifted. Calculation replaced rage. I think we all want what's best for our young savers, Victor said loudly. If there were errors in fee application, we'll certainly address them. That's what responsible institutions do. Maya's voice cut through his spin. This isn't about errors, Maya said. It's about systematic extraction. Our investigation is ongoing. More findings are likely. Phones buzzed around the lobby. News of the confrontation was spreading digitally. Social media posts multiplied. The moment was escaping containment. Victor realized he couldn't talk his way out. Not this time. The evidence was too public. The witnesses too numerous. The documentation too thorough. His handler whispered again. He nodded once. Then he approached Zuri. Cameras followed his movement. The child stepped closer to Ruth. I want to apologize, Victor said to Zuri. His voice carried across the lobby, but it sounded hollow, performative. Ruth's hand tightened on Zuri's shoulder. The child deserved better than theater. Look at her when you apologize, Ruth said quietly. And mean it. Victor's jaw clenched. He was being directed by someone he'd dismissed as irrelevant. An elderly black woman in sensible shoes. Someone who should have been easy to ignore. But phones recorded every movement. Reporters typed frantically. Parents watched with fierce attention. He couldn't walk away without confirming every accusation Ruth had made. He lowered himself slightly, attempting to meet Zuri's eye level. The gesture looked awkward, unnatural. I apologize, Victor said. To you, for any hardship our fee structure caused. Zuri looked at Ruth. The older woman nodded encouragingly. The child's voice was small but clear. You made fun of my $8, Zuri said. Victor's face tightened. Being corrected by a 9-year-old in public was not part of his world experience. I shouldn't have done that, Victor said. Your savings matter. Every dollar you saved matters. Ruth studied his expression. She saw humiliation, resentment, self-preservation, but not genuine remorse. Not yet. Perhaps that would come later. Or perhaps men this wealthy never truly learned. A parent in the crowd spoke up. Her voice shook with anger. My daughter saved birthday money for 3 years, the parent said. Your fees took almost $40. Where's her apology? Other voices joined. The crowd was finding its voice. Individual stories merged into collective grievance. Ruth felt the power of shared experience. Maya stepped forward. Her voice carried official weight. Written apologies and account statements will be mailed to all affected families, Maya said. Mr. Lang's institution will also fund financial literacy programs at no cost to participants. That's part of the settlement. Victor's handler pulled him upright. She whispered urgently. He nodded. His public face was rebuilding itself. Smile muscles engaged. Charm protocols initiated. Of course, Victor said into his microphone. We're committed to serving our community, all of our community. The words rang false, but they created plausible deniability. They gave him an exit. Daniel turned his terminal screen outward. He angled it so everyone could see. The green entries continued scrolling. Restitution after restitution. Names and balances updating in real time. These are children's accounts across the city, Daniel said, all receiving corrected balances. This is what justice looks like. Someone began clapping again. This time it built faster. Parents who had felt powerless suddenly saw proof that systems could bend, that accountability could be forced, that one elderly woman with documentation could move mountains. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. This wasn't about her. It was about Zuri, about thousands of children, about dignity being measurable and restorable. Evelyn lowered her phone. She had hours of footage, evidence that couldn't be disputed or buried. She caught Ruth's eye and nodded. It was done. The terminal screen refreshed one final time. The restitution entries slowed, then stopped. The system had processed every flagged account, thousands of corrections, tens of thousands of dollars returned. Daniel printed a summary report. He handed copies to Maya and to Ruth. The numbers told the story. Average restitution, $43 per account. Total impact, $117,000 returned to families. This money was taken from children, Ruth said. Now it's theirs again. Zuri held her updated statement like a trophy. Her balance showed $12.16, more than she'd started with. The system had added interest on the reversed fees. A little boy approached their group. He held his mother's phone. His account had jumped by $38. His eyes were wide with wonder. "Is this real?" the boy asked Zuri. Zuri looked at Ruth. The older woman smiled. "It's real," Zuri said to the boy. "We asked questions. They had to answer." The simplicity of it struck Ruth. A child's logic cutting through institutional complexity. We asked. They answered. Justice could be that straightforward when witnesses demanded it. Victor's handler managed to pull him toward the exit. His entourage formed around him, protecting, spinning, planning damage control. He paused at the door and looked back at Ruth. Their eyes met across the lobby. No words passed, but understanding did. She had outmaneuvered him, using his own publicity event, his own cameras, his own need for spectacle. He left without another word. Maya approached Ruth. She extended her hand. They shook formally. "Your documentation was exceptional," Maya said. "We'd been watching this institution for months. Your packet gave us grounds to act immediately." "Will this change anything system-wide?" Ruth asked. "It's precedent," Maya said. "Other regulators are already calling. This case will be studied, replicated. The algorithm will have to change everywhere." Ruth's breath caught. She hadn't dared hope for that. Citywide restoration was victory enough. But system-wide reform? That was transformation. Parents gathered their children. They checked balances on phones, made plans to transfer money to credit unions and community banks. The trust was broken. Relationships were ending. Daniel stood alone at his terminal. The lobby was emptying. Balloons sagged. The celebration had transformed into something its planners never intended. Ruth approached him. Zuri followed quietly. "What happens to you now?" Ruth asked Daniel. He shrugged. His face was tired but peaceful. "I don't know," Daniel said. Maybe I get fired. Maybe I become a pariah. But I can look at myself tonight. Ruth understood. She had spent years filing reports that disappeared, watching harm continue. Today they had stopped it. Even temporarily, even partially, they had stopped it. Thank you for reading the truth aloud, Ruth said. Daniel nodded. He looked at Zuri. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, Daniel said to the child. Zuri held up her statement. The numbers shone under the lobby lights. I just wanted to see my balance, Zuri said. Such a simple wish, such a profound result. The crowd thinned. Reporters filed stories from their phones. Local news crews packed equipment. The spectacle was ending, but the impact would ripple outward for months. Evelyn joined Ruth and Zuri. She scrolled through the video on her phone. Hours of footage, every confrontation, every revelation, every moment of transformation. I'll edit this tonight, Evelyn said. The library can host a community screening. Ruth nodded. Documentation mattered. Memory mattered. This couldn't become a story that got smoothed and sanitized. The raw truth needed preserving. A woman approached tentatively. She carried a sleeping toddler. An older child walked beside her. Excuse me, the woman said to Ruth. You're the lady who did this? Ruth felt uncomfortable with the framing. She hadn't acted alone. Daniel had confirmed. Maya had enforced. Zuri had trusted. Evelyn had witnessed. It was collective action. I documented it, Ruth said. Others made it real. The woman's eyes filled with tears. My son's account had $6 left, the woman said. It's at 28 now. That's school supplies. That's his lunch money for 2 weeks. Ruth's chest tightened. The abstract numbers had concrete meanings. Pencils, notebooks, food, dignity. I'm glad it helped, Ruth said. The woman shifted the toddler in her arms. Her voice was thick. I work 2 jobs, the woman said. I thought I was teaching him wrong, that I was failing at helping him save. But it wasn't me, it was them. Ruth placed her hand on the woman's arm. The touch was brief but grounding. You didn't fail, Ruth said. The system failed, and today we made it pay us back. The woman nodded. She wiped her eyes. Her son tugged at her shirt. They moved toward the exit together. Just one family among hundreds. But each one mattered. Daniel approached from his station. He carried his briefcase and his employee badge. Someone from corporate had arrived. A woman in a dark suit who had spoken briefly and coldly. They're suspending me pending investigation, Daniel said. Will you be okay? Ruth asked. I'll figure it out, Daniel said. But I won't figure it out by staying silent anymore. He crouched slightly to address Zuri. Keep saving, Daniel said to her. Your money is yours. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Zuri nodded solemnly. Daniel stood and walked toward the exit. His shoulders were straighter than when Ruth had first met him. Loss had clarified him somehow. Maya finished her consultation with local reporters. She joined Ruth's small group. Her official demeanor had softened slightly. The investigation will take months, Maya said, but enforcement deposits are final. This money can't be clawed back. What about other banks? Evelyn asked. We're issuing guidance this week, Maya said. Examiners across the state will review youth account structures. This won't be isolated. Ruth felt satisfaction settle over her. Not triumph, not celebration. Just the quiet knowledge that harm had been reduced. That children would keep more of their pennies. That dignity had been defended and partially restored. Ruth, Evelyn, and Zuri walked out into afternoon sunlight. The street looked normal. Traffic hummed. People walked past. The world continued oblivious to the transformation that had just occurred inside that glass building. Zuri clutched her statement in both hands. She walked carefully so the paper wouldn't wrinkle. Ruth noticed the child's expression. Relief mixed with confusion. Victory felt strange when you'd expected shame. "Can I show my grandma?" Zuri asked. "Of course," Ruth said. "This is yours to share." They walked toward the bus stop. Evelyn checked her phone. News alerts were already appearing. Local outlets had picked up the story. Social media spread it further. Hashtags formed. "You'll be in the news," Evelyn said to Ruth. Ruth's expression tightened. She didn't want attention. She wanted outcomes. But attention served outcomes sometimes. If this story reached other families, other communities, then the discomfort was worth it. The bus arrived. They climbed aboard. Zuri sat between Ruth and Evelyn. The statement lay across her lap. She traced the numbers with her finger. "Will Mr. Lang get in trouble?" Zuri asked. Ruth considered how to answer. Truth required nuance. The rich rarely faced consequences proportional to their harm, but today had cost Lang something. Public humiliation, forced restitution, system-wide scrutiny. "He'll have to change how his bank works," Ruth said. "That's a kind of trouble." "Will other kids get their money back too?" Zuri asked. "Yes," Ruth said. "Thousands of them, because you were brave enough to ask questions." Zuri looked at her statement again. Her voice was soft. "I just wanted to see my balance," Zuri said. The phrase had become something more. A moral statement. A demand for transparency. A child's simple wish revealing systemic injustice. The bus carried them through familiar neighborhoods, past the library where this had started, past the church where Ruth taught finance classes, past schools where children would benefit from returned fees. Evelyn downloaded her footage to cloud storage, backing up evidence, protecting memory, ensuring the moment couldn't be disappeared. "The library board will want to honor you," Evelyn said to Ruth. Ruth shook her head. "Honor the families," Ruth said. "Honor the children who trusted their pennies to institutions that betrayed them." Zuri leaned against Ruth's shoulder. The child was exhausted. Emotional labor had drained her. Ruth wrapped an arm around her. Protection offered without hesitation. The bus approached Zuri's stop. They stood together. Ruth walked the child to the corner where her grandmother waited. The older woman's face showed confusion and concern. Ruth explained quickly. The bank, the fees, the confrontation, the restitution. She handed over the printed statement. Zuri's grandmother read it twice. "Lord have mercy," the grandmother said. "You did this?" "Zuri did this," Ruth said. "I just helped her ask the right questions." The grandmother pulled Ruth into a tight hug. When she released her, tears tracked down both women's faces. "Thank you," the grandmother said. "Thank you for seeing her, for believing her." Ruth nodded. She couldn't speak past the emotion in her throat. She watched Zuri and her grandmother walk toward their building. The child turned and waved. Ruth waved back. Something shifted in her expression. This was why she'd fought. 3 weeks passed. The story cycled through news feeds, then faded. Other scandals arrived. Other injustices demanded attention. But the changes persisted beneath the surface. The State Financial Examination Office issued new guidelines. Youth accounts across the region underwent review. Fees dropped or disappeared. Algorithms were revised or abandoned. Banks calculated that public trust cost less to maintain than hostile testimony in regulatory hearings. Daniel Park was not fired. Instead, he was quietly transferred to a community branch in a neighborhood the bank had redlined for decades. His salary was cut, his title reduced. But he had a job. And his conscience. Ruth received a letter from Maya. The investigation had expanded. Federal regulators were involved now. Pattern recognition software was being developed to flag discriminatory algorithms, before they extracted wealth. The work would take years. But momentum had started. Evelyn screened her documentary at the library. 200 people attended. They watched the confrontation unfold on the large community room screen. They applauded when Zuri's balance jumped. They booed when Victor's smile collapsed. Collective catharsis happened in that darkened room. The library board voted to rename the financial literacy space. A small plaque was mounted beside the door. Ellison Community Finance Room. Ruth attended the ceremony reluctantly. She stood beside Zuri for the photograph. The child beamed. Local credit unions reported increased youth account openings. Parents were moving money, teaching children about ethical banking, seeking institutions that valued deposits more than fees, small rebellions compounding into market pressure. Ruth returned to her teaching schedule. But the classes had changed. Parents brought questions about fee structures, about reading bank statements, about recognizing predatory patterns. She showed them what to look for, how to document, when to escalate. One evening, Daniel Park appeared in the back of the room. He waited until the session ended, then approached Ruth. "I need to learn how to do what you do," Daniel said. "Which part?" Ruth asked. "The part where you see wrong and refuse to accept it," Daniel said. Ruth smiled. She handed him a copy of her original documentation packet, the memos and schedules that had started everything. "Read this," Ruth said. "Then find the next pattern. There's always a next pattern." Daniel took the packet carefully. He looked at it like scripture, something that could guide transformation if properly studied. Zuri's grandmother invited Ruth to Sunday dinner. The house smelled of cooking greens and cornbread. Zuri showed Ruth her room. A jar sat on the dresser. Coins and bills filled it halfway. "I'm still saving," Zuri said, "but I keep it here now." Ruth understood. Trust once broken required time to rebuild. The child's caution was wisdom. "That's smart," Ruth said, "until you find a bank that respects you." They ate together. 3 generations of black women around a table. Stories flowed. Laughter bubbled up. The crisis had passed. Life continued, but changed. Aware now of its own agency, spring arrived. The library hosted a community financial literacy fair. Tables lined the meeting room. Credit unions, community banks, nonprofit financial counselors, all screened for predatory practices by a committee Ruth chaired. Zuri helped at Ruth's table. She handed out pamphlets about reading fee disclosures. She demonstrated how to use a ledger. She told her story to anyone who asked. "I just wanted to see my balance," Zuri would say, "and Mrs. Ellison helped me." Each retelling reinforced the memory, turned trauma into testimony, gave meaning to hardship. The child was healing by teaching. A reporter approached for a follow-up story. She asked Ruth if she felt victorious. "I feel tired," Ruth said honestly, "and hopeful. Those aren't opposites." The reporter typed notes. She asked about next steps, future investigations, ongoing work. "There's always more work," Ruth said. "Systems of extraction don't dismantle themselves. They have to be revealed, confronted, forced to change." Daniel Park arrived mid-morning. He brought a group of teenagers from his new branch location. They had questions about starting their own savings accounts, about avoiding fees, about building wealth slowly and sustainably. Ruth and Daniel co-taught a session. He explained internal bank mechanics. She explained how to read power, where to apply pressure, when to document. Their partnership was unexpected but effective. Evelyn documented the fair. Not for news outlets this time, for the library's archive, building institutional memory, creating a record that future organizers could access. At lunch, Ruth sat with Zuri in the library's courtyard. They shared sandwiches, watched birds pick at crumbs. The child was more confident now, less afraid. The confrontation had changed her. Are you still an auditor? Zuri asked. I'm retired, Ruth said. But you still find problems, Zuri said. Ruth smiled. The child understood essential truth. Retirement was a status. Justice work was identity. I find problems, Ruth agreed, and I document them, and I get help making them right. Will you teach me? Zuri asked. Ruth's chest tightened. She looked at this small girl who had stood in a glass-walled lobby and demanded accountability, who had trusted Ruth to amplify her voice, who had changed a system through simple persistence. Yes, Ruth said, I'll teach you everything I know. They finished eating, returned to the fair, helped families navigate financial options, answered questions, built networks. The work continued. Evening came. Attendees departed with folders of information, commitments to open youth accounts at ethical institutions, knowledge about reading fine print, power to recognize when systems served them versus when they served systems. Ruth locked up the Ellison Community Finance Room. The plaque caught late sunlight. Her name etched in brass. Permanent recognition of temporary disruption. She touched it briefly, then walked out. Evelyn waited in the lobby. Good day? Evelyn asked. Good day, Ruth confirmed. They walked out together. The spring evening was mild. The street was quiet. Their footsteps echoed on sidewalk. Ruth felt something settle in her chest. Not completion, but rightness. Purpose fulfilled even if not finished. 6 months after the confrontation, the Ellison Community Finance Room hosted its usual Tuesday evening session. 20 folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. Ruth at the front with her worn notebook and a whiteboard. Families arrived steadily. Familiar faces mixed with new ones. Word had spread about free financial literacy training, about a place where questions were welcomed, where dignity was protected. Zuri helped set up materials. She arranged pamphlets neatly, placed pencils and notepads at each seat. The 9-year-old moved with purpose. Confidence had replaced her earlier hesitation. Daniel Park stood in the doorway. He attended most sessions now, contributing when asked, learning when not. His redemption arc was quiet but genuine. Starting soon? Daniel asked Ruth. 5 minutes, Ruth said. A young mother entered with 3 children. She looked overwhelmed. Ruth recognized the expression. Financial stress worn openly. She approached the woman directly. Welcome, Ruth said. I'm Ruth. This is Zuri. We're glad you're here. The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly. Being greeted personally mattered. Being named mattered. Ruth understood the power of small dignities. The session began. Ruth taught the evening's topic, recognizing and challenging unfair fees. She used real examples, showed redacted statements, walked through documentation methods step by step. Zuri stood at one point. She read a short poem she'd written for a school assignment. Her voice was clear and steady. Numbers tell stories, Zuri read. Small stories about big things, like who counts and who's counted, like what grows and what's taken. I learned to read numbers. Now I teach them to tell the truth. Applause filled the small room. The child had found her voice, had learned her power, had discovered that speaking mattered. After the presentation, families clustered around tables. Ruth and Daniel answered individual questions. Zuri demonstrated ledger keeping to younger children. Evelyn photographed the scene for library records. A man in his 30s approached Ruth. He carried a bank statement. His hands shook slightly. They're charging my mother $15 a month for nothing, the man said. She's 78, on a fixed income. These fees are bleeding her. Ruth took the statement. She read through the entries. Maintenance fees, statement fees, low balance penalties, senior account that penalized seniors. Her jaw tightened. Let me make a copy, Ruth said. And let's talk about next steps. The pattern recognition that had driven her career never stopped. Injustice revealed itself constantly to those willing to look. The work was infinite because the systems were designed that way. But tonight was also about celebration, about progress measured in restored balances and revised policies, about children who now checked their statements, about parents who understood their power. As the session ended, Ruth stood in the doorway of the finance room. She watched families file out, carrying folders, making plans, connected to resources, less alone than when they'd arrived. The plaque beside the door caught her eye. Ellison Community Finance Room. Her name attached to this work, this space, this continuing transformation. Zuri appeared at her side. The child slipped her hand into Ruth's. They stood together in comfortable silence, witnessing departures, planning next week's session, existing in the satisfaction of sustainable effort. "Ready to lock up?" Evelyn called from the circulation desk. "Almost," Ruth said. She took one more look at the empty room. The chairs arranged in welcome, the whiteboard covered in numbers and strategies, the pamphlets stacked neatly for next time. This was the work. Not spectacular, not final, but necessary and continuous. Dignity defended in small increments, justice measured in documented patterns and reversed fees, power built through collective witness and persistent truth-telling. Ruth turned off the lights. She locked the door. The brass plaque gleamed in the hallway fluorescence. She touched it once, then walked toward the exit with Zuri beside her. The evening was cool and clear. Stars appeared overhead. The city hummed with life continuing. Problems persisted. But so did solutions. So did solidarity. So did the quiet determination of people who refused to accept harm as inevitable. Ruth looked at Zuri, the child who had just wanted to see her balance, who had trusted Ruth to help, who had changed a system through simple courage. "Same time next week?" Ruth asked. "Same time," Zuri confirmed. They walked in different directions, toward different homes, but connected by shared history, by transformation witnessed and created, by the knowledge that dignity, once restored, compounded quietly through communities. Ruth exhaled slowly. The night didn't feel like endings anymore. It felt like beginnings compounding. She smiled. She finally knew the work would continue.